On December 27, 1892, Livingstone and Biddle College, now known as Johnson C. Smith University, played in Salisbury, North Carolina, with Biddle winning 5-0. Over time, HBCU football has evolved. HBCU football's popularity continues to rise. Millions attend games each year and millions more watch on television. The HBCU bands provide some of the top entertainment in the country. Over that time, some of the best players to ever play in the National Football League played at HBCUs. Every Monday through Friday on the HBCU Football Daily Podcast, national radio and television host Donal Ware takes a look at what's happening in HBCU football and talks with coaches, players, administrators, and media about the season. Make sure you join the conversation on social media. Now, here's your host, Donal Ware.
You've got it locked to the HBCU Football Daily Podcast for today, Friday, October 20th. I'm Donal Ware. It's Friday. Week 8 of the HBCU football season kicked off last night as North Carolina Central, the defending HBCU champs, defeated Morgan State 16-10. And first of all, it was good to see football back on the campus of Morgan State University in light of the tragedy going back about 3 weeks ago or so, with the shooting on campus right prior to homecoming, where Morgan State's homecoming was in fact canceled. And so it was good to see people back on campus in a safe environment and some football being played on Thursday night. As for the football game, I thought there were a lot of opportunities in this football game for Morgan State. Give the Eagles a lot of credit. The Eagles are the defending champions. The Morgan doesn't have a great offense. I think if Morgan had a decent offense, then it might have won this football game. Because I mean, let's look at the numbers. Okay, even if you look at the first downs. The Eagles had 13 first downs. The Bears had 12. I think the Eagles' defense is very, very good. I think Morgan State's defense is on the elite level. Check this out. You're talking about Davius Richard, perhaps the best player in all of HBCU football, one of the best quarterbacks and one of the best players in FCS football. That Eagle offense had 201 yards of total offense. You look at Davius Richards' numbers: 16 of 30, 122 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. He was only sacked once, but he carried the ball 11 times for only 29 yards. As a matter of fact, as a team, the Eagles only had 79 yards rushing in the football game. That would suggest to me, and we've seen this during the course of this season. Yes, the Bears came into that football game with a 1-4 record, leave out of that football game with a 1-5 record. That said, okay, and the Bears are down 1 to the Eagles currently in the MEAC standings. To me, it says this is a Bear team that may be right there still, even though 1 down. Okay, because I mean, at the end of the day, right now, to me, the Eagles came back, came back against Elon, came back against Campbell, won both of those football games. And matter of fact, came back from Campbell's down like 3 touchdowns, came back on Elon. North Carolina Central has definitely won some football games this year. But to me, I don't know, there seems to be a little bit of a chink in the armor with respect to North Carolina Central and its offense. Now, the defense has been very, very good, no doubt about it. But for the most part, now points-wise, I mean, you look at Campbell giving up 48 points, even to Elon, giving up the 23 points. Elon was nationally ranked, and the Eagles are definitely doing well, winning football games. But it's something about the offense that isn't the same as it was last year, and the numbers would suggest that. Let's look at some of those numbers really quickly as it relates to North Carolina Central, rushing the football for 157 yards per game. Davius Richard only throwing for 158 yards per game this season. My point is, I think the MEAC, again, the Eagles are up 1 right now on Morgan State. But, I'm not sleeping on any team in the MEAC. I realize Howard has had some challenging times. MEAC play begins. South Carolina State has had some challenging times. MEAC play begins. Norfolk State has had some challenging time. MEAC play begins. Delaware State has had some challenging times. MEAC play begins. I think that, with that being said, I think the Eagles got to get something going a little bit more from an offensive perspective. I think that you had at least one key play in the game that really turned the tide. Because remember, Morgan got the football, marched right down the field, got the field goal, to open the game. That game remained 3-0, for quite some time. So, it was one of those deals. As a matter of fact, it was 3-0 through at halftime. It was still 3-0. Okay. And then after the end of 3, it was only 3-3. And this is a Morgan State team that came in, again, as I mentioned, 1-4 on the season. I thought that the interception and the return by the Eagles really I think, what was that? I think that was the third. I can't remember if it was the third or the fourth quarter. That was key. I mean, I think that was really big. When I'm looking at the numbers, the interception was attributed to Dominique Anthony. I thought it was Carson Baker, actually, that threw that interception. Either way, the Eagles returned it back, put some points on the board, and I think that's what sealed the deal. Plus, Morgan State turned the ball over, fumbled the football one other time. And so 2 turnovers really sealed the fate, I think, of Morgan without any offense, because that is an elite defense. That Morgan State defense is an elite defense. That said, the Eagles protected the football, made plays when it needed to make plays, did enough to win this football game. My only concern with the defending champs, a win is a win. As the legendary Rod Broadway would say, all wins are good wins. This win by the Eagles falls under that category. But what about moving forward? That's sort of my concern with North Carolina Central moving forward. I think there are some positives, right? Only 6 teams in the MEAC, but we get to see MEAC play, and it becomes an absolute dogfight from this time all the way through the end of the season. We saw even last year where South Carolina State was down, managed to beat North Carolina Central, although the Bulldogs dropped a couple of games, and the Eagles ultimately won the MEAC and then went on. I mean, I know officially it was a tie with Howard, but no, the Eagles beat the Bison head to head, thus should have been named conference champions outright, but ultimately won the HBCU national championship with that victory over Jackson State. So good, solid. It was a solid defensive struggle. Again, not particularly great offensively by either team. Okay, particularly Morgan State, but I think a lot of that, the Eagles' struggles on offense in this football game, had more to do with Morgan State being an elite defense, again, holding the Eagles to 201 yards in that football game. So game was good. I definitely enjoyed that football game. And I'll tell you what, I mean, we'll see what happens. I think the MEAC is going to come down to the wire this year. Okay. It did sort of last year because Howard, was in the mix and had only lost 1 football game, even though Howard lost to the Eagles head to head. So let's look at the HBCU National Game of the Week, which is going to take place on tomorrow. Fayetteville State is hosting Johnson C. Smith. So this is a Fayetteville State team that has gotten it done two ways. From an offensive perspective, running the football, and they've been able to stop opponents defensively. That's how the Broncos have gotten it done this year. As good as the Broncos defense is, Johnson C. Smith's defense, from a numbers perspective, is even better than that. Unfortunately for Johnson C. Smith, it hasn't been great offensively at all this year either. Okay. But with that being said, it has gotten it done defensively. I think when you look at Johnson C. Smith and the quarterback situation, I mean, it was supposed to be a little bit different for Johnson C. Smith this year. That just hasn't been the case so far in terms of the quarterback play. Tyrell Jackson, he's out. You bring in Robert Adams. He hasn't turned the ball over, but he hasn't thrown a touchdown pass either this year. So I think this will be another battle from a defensive perspective. Both teams run the football well. Both teams are adept at stopping the run. This game is in Fayetteville, North Carolina. And while it has upset written all over it, to me, what I would say is, when I look at the schedule from both teams, now 2 losses by Fayetteville State so far this year, but I mean, the 2 losses were 2 games to start the season, a heartbreaking loss to end the game against UNC Pembroke, and then a 24-10 loss to Lenore-Rhine. Both have beaten Lincoln this year, who is much improved. The difference to me is the schedule is tougher for Fayetteville State. Beat Virginia Union 10-7, a last-second field goal with 6 seconds remaining. That was a conference game. And so to me, I think that Fayetteville State, 5-time defending Southern Division champs, CIAA defending champs, has had a better schedule in terms of the competition level. And so for that reason, I will go with Fayetteville State over Johnson C. Smith in this football game. You can give me your thoughts. You can hit me up via Twitter at Boxtorow, BOXTOROW, on the Fayetteville State Johnson C. Smith matchup, or my thoughts on the Morgan State North Carolina Central matchup and the rest of the season as it relates to the MEAC. On the weekend edition of Box to Row, I tell you what, looking forward to that. We're going to be joined by Edward Waters, head football coach Toriano Morgan, going to be joined by Alabama State head football coach Eddie Robinson Jr., and going to be joined by Washington Commanders corner Danny Johnson, who, of course, a former HBCU All-American, played his collegiate football at Southern University. Don't forget to tell a couple of friends about the HBCU Football Daily Podcast. You can catch up on the podcast. If you've missed any of our podcasts, you can watch on the Box to Row YouTube channel, as well as on boxtorow.com and iHeartMedia.com as well. Enjoy week 8 of HBCU football.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the HBCU Football Daily Podcast. You can also listen to the podcast at boxtorow.com, iHeartMedia, or wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to get your HBCU football fix on Box to Row with Donal Ware each weekend on the radio station near you, and on SiriusXM on HBCU Channel 142, and on ESPNU Radio on SiriusXM Channel 84. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Box to Row for the latest in HBCU football, and don't forget to tell a friend.